The North Atlantic stretched endlessly under grey November skies in 1943, its rolling swells concealing deadly intentions beneath the surface. At a depth of 60 meters, the German submarine U-573 glided silently through the frigid waters, her hydrophones detecting the rhythmic thrumming of merchant vessel engines 4,000 meters ahead. Kapitänleutnant Heinrich Müller pressed his eye to the periscope, watching the black silhouettes of 8 cargo ships maintaining their eastbound course toward Britain. His crew believed they had discovered the perfect target, a defenseless convoy ripe for destruction. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What Müller and his experienced crew could never have imagined was that their radio transmission reporting the unescorted convoy would trigger one of the most carefully orchestrated naval ambushes of the entire conflict, revealing how dramatically the balance of power had shifted beneath the Atlantic's deceptive surface. Müller had commanded U-573 for 18 months, surviving longer than most submarine captains in what sailors now grimly called the Tonnage War. His boat was one of the newer Type 7C models, stretching 67 meters in length and carrying 14 torpedoes in her forward and aft tubes. The submarine displaced 769 tons submerged and could reach 17 knots on the surface, with her twin diesels roaring at maximum power. More importantly for this moment, she carried the latest Enigma cipher machine, enabling secure communications with Admiral Karl Dönitz's submarine headquarters in Lorient, France. Standing beside Müller in the cramped conning tower, his watch officer, Oberleutnant zur See Klaus Weber, counted the merchant vessels through his own periscope. 8 steamers, Herr Callot, Weber reported, using the traditional submarine abbreviation for Kapitänleutnant, approximately 6,000 tons each. No escort vessels visible on any bearing. The convoy designation was HX-265, though the German crew remained unaware of this Allied classification. The 8 merchant ships included the Liberty ship Samuel Gompers, carrying 5,000 tons of steel and automotive parts, the British freighter Manchester Guardian, loaded with grain and machinery, and 6 other vessels transporting everything from petroleum products to military vehicles. Each ship represented months of American industrial production and thousands of tons of materials desperately needed by British forces. Müller studied the formation carefully. The ships maintained a typical convoy pattern, 4 columns of 2 vessels each, spaced at intervals of 1,000 meters. Their speed appeared steady at approximately 9 knots, a pace that suggested heavily loaded cargo holds, rather than the faster movement of empty vessels returning to North American ports. Everything about this convoy suggested a routine supply run, exactly the type of target that had made German submarine commanders legendary among their crews. "Signal to headquarters," Müller commanded, stepping back from the periscope. 8 merchant vessels proceeding course 090, speed 9 knots, position 52 degrees 30 minutes north, 28 degrees 15 minutes west. No escorts visible. Am preparing to attack. The radio operator, Funkefreiter Hans Becker, carefully encoded the message using the daily Enigma settings. The encryption machine, roughly the size of a typewriter, featured 3 rotating wheels that created millions of possible cipher combinations. Each day, submarine crews received new wheel positions and plugboard settings, theoretically making their communications impossible for Allied forces to intercept and decode. Becker transmitted the brief message in high-speed burst transmission, lasting only 37 seconds to minimize detection by enemy direction-finding equipment. What the German crew could not have known was that their supposedly unbreakable code had been compromised for months. At Bletchley Park in England, British cryptanalysts led by teams of mathematicians and linguists had been systematically breaking Enigma communications through a combination of captured cipher machines, mathematical analysis, and sheer intellectual determination. The Colossus computers, weighing 5 tons each and containing over 2,000 electronic valves, processed thousands of potential decryption combinations every hour. The message from U-573 reached Allied intelligence within 40 minutes of transmission. At the Western Approaches Command in Liverpool, Commodore Gilbert Roberts studied the decoded German signal alongside detailed charts of the North Atlantic. Roberts commanded the Convoy routing system that had evolved from desperate improvisation in 1941 into a sophisticated network of intelligence coordination, escort scheduling, and tactical planning. "They believe it's an unescorted convoy," Roberts observed to his operations officer, "but Escort Group B7 is already in position 15 miles ahead of the merchantman." Roberts had spent his career understanding the psychological elements of naval warfare. The German submarine commander would approach with confidence, expecting easy targets and minimal resistance. That confidence would become his greatest vulnerability. Escort Group B7 consisted of 4 American destroyers temporarily assigned to Atlantic convoy duty, while their regular Royal Navy escorts underwent maintenance in Scottish ports. The lead ship, USS Fletcher, carried the group commander, Lieutenant Commander James Patterson, a 34-year-old officer from Minnesota, who had transferred from battleship duty to destroyer command specifically to fight submarines. Patterson's ship displaced 2,050 tons fully loaded and carried 5 5-inch guns, 10 21-inch torpedo tubes, and a comprehensive array of anti-submarine weapons. Accompanying Fletcher were USS O'Brien, USS Nicholas, and USS Radford, each carrying similar armament and crews trained extensively in anti-submarine warfare. The 4 destroyers could reach 37 knots at maximum speed and had been practicing coordinated hunting tactics for 6 months. Their sonar equipment, while not perfect, had improved dramatically since the early war years, and their depth charge patterns could saturate underwater areas with devastating effectiveness. Patterson received the intelligence report about U-573 at 14:30 hours through encrypted radio communication. The message included the submarine's reported position, course, and the German commander's apparent belief that no escorts protected the convoy. Patterson immediately recognized the tactical opportunity. Instead of revealing his destroyer's presence, he could allow the submarine to approach while positioning his ships for maximum advantage. "Signal the convoy," Patterson ordered his communications officer. "Maintain current course and speed. Do not acknowledge escort presence. We want that submarine commander confident and committed to his attack approach." Meanwhile, aboard U-573, Miller completed his tactical assessment. Sunset would occur at 17:15 hours, providing ideal conditions for a surface attack. German submarine doctrine emphasized surface engagements whenever possible, utilizing the boat's superior speed and maneuverability compared to submerged operations. The plan appeared straightforward: surface after dark, approach the convoy from the port quarter, fire a spread of torpedoes at the largest targets, then escape at maximum surface speed before any potential escorts could respond. The submarine's crew prepared methodically for the attack. In the forward torpedo room, Oberbootsman Friedrich Koch supervised the final checks on 4 torpedoes designated for the assault. Each torpedo carried a 300-kilogram warhead and could travel up to 6,000 meters at 44 knots. The magnetic pistols had been adjusted for optimal detonation beneath enemy hulls, and the gyroscopic guidance systems were calibrated for the anticipated target bearings. Koch had served aboard submarines since 1939, participating in the early successful campaigns against British shipping. He remembered when individual submarine commanders regularly sank 20 or 30,000 tons of merchant shipping per patrol. Those days seemed increasingly distant as Allied countermeasures became more sophisticated and German losses mounted steadily. Still, an unescorted convoy represented the type of target that had made submarine service attractive to ambitious young naval officers. At 1600 hours, approximately 4 hours before the planned attack, Patterson repositioned his destroyer group. Instead of maintaining their forward screening position, the 4 American ships executed a carefully planned dispersal pattern. Fletcher and O'Brien moved to positions northwest of the convoy, while Nicholas and Radford took stations southwest of the merchant vessels. This arrangement created a semicircular trap, with the convoy as bait and the destroyers positioned to converge from multiple directions. The tactical innovation represented months of development by Allied naval staffs. Traditional escort procedures placed warships in close proximity to merchant vessels, reacting to submarine attacks rather than anticipating them. Patterson's group practiced what naval theorists called hunter-killer tactics, using intelligence information to position escorts where submarines would be most vulnerable rather than where convoys needed immediate protection. Each destroyer maintained radio silence and minimal radar emissions to avoid detection by German electronic surveillance equipment. The crews remained at general quarters, with all weapon systems prepared for immediate action. Patterson estimated that the submarine would surface approximately 8 miles from the convoy, providing his destroyers with sufficient time to close to effective engagement range while remaining undetected. Aboard the merchant vessels, crews continued their routine duties without knowledge of the approaching crisis. The convoy Commodore Harrison, aboard the lead ship Manchester Guardian, maintained normal navigation procedures and communication schedules. The appearance of a completely undefended convoy was essential to maintaining the submarine commander's confidence and ensuring his commitment to the surface attack. As darkness approached, Müller brought U-573 to periscope depth for final reconnaissance. The merchant ships continued their steady eastbound course, showing appropriate navigation lights and maintaining their vulnerable formation. No radar transmissions indicated the presence of escort vessels, and passive sonar detected only the cargo ship's propeller noise. Everything confirmed the initial assessment of an undefended convoy, presenting perfect targets. "Surface the boat," Müller commanded at 1900 hours, well after full darkness had settled over the North Atlantic. The submarine's ballast tanks expelled compressed air with characteristic hissing sounds as U-573 rose toward the surface. Within 3 minutes, the conning tower broke through the rolling swells, and Müller climbed to the bridge through the main hatch. The November night was crystal clear, with scattered stars providing minimal illumination above the dark ocean. The convoy's silhouettes remained visible approximately 7,000 meters to the northeast, perfect targets outlined against the slightly lighter eastern horizon. Müller ordered his diesels started, and the submarine began accelerating toward attack position at 16 knots surface speed. What Müller could not detect was the coordinated movement of 4 American destroyers converging on his position. Patterson's ships had tracked the submarine's surfacing through passive sonar and were now approaching from different bearings to prevent escape. Fletcher approached from the northwest at 28 knots, while O'Brien closed from the northeast. Nicholas and Radford completed the encirclement from the south and southwest, creating an inescapable tactical box around the unsuspecting submarine. The German attack proceeded according to standard submarine doctrine. Müller approached the convoy from the port quarter, positioning U-573 for a favorable firing angle against the largest merchant vessels. At 3,000 meters range, he ordered the torpedo tubes prepared for firing. The submarine's forward torpedo room reported ready status for a 4-torpedo spread, targeting the 2 leading cargo ships. "Torpedoes ready, Herr Callot," reported the torpedo officer through the voice pipe connecting the bridge to the control room. Müller raised his binoculars for final target assessment, expecting to begin one of the most successful attacks of his career. The merchant ships continued their steady course, apparently unaware of the deadly threat approaching from their port side. At precisely that moment, Patterson's destroyer Fletcher activated her searchlight. The brilliant beam illuminated U-573 like daylight, instantly destroying the submarine's tactical advantage and revealing the carefully prepared trap. Before Müller could react, 3 more searchlights blazed to life from different directions, catching the submarine in a crossfire of blinding illumination that made concealment impossible. "American destroyers!" Weber shouted from the conning tower, his voice carrying the shock and disbelief that swept through the submarine crew. The carefully planned attack had become a desperate fight for survival in less than 30 seconds. Patterson's voice carried across the water, through Fletcher's powerful loudspeakers, amplified by electronic equipment that ensured every word reached the German submarine. "German submarine, this is the United States Navy. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surface completely and prepare to surrender, or we will open fire." Müller faced an impossible tactical situation. 4 destroyers with superior speed, firepower, and position surrounded his submarine. Diving would require at least 90 seconds, during which time the destroyers could close to point-blank range and attack with depth charges. Attempting to escape on the surface would expose U-573 to devastating gunfire from multiple directions. Fighting was suicide. But surrender meant the loss of his boat, crew, and mission. The psychological impact on the German crew was immediate and profound. Weber stared at the surrounding destroyers with undisguised amazement. "How did they know, Herr Kalu? How could they have been waiting for us?" Müller had no answer. Everything about the convoy had appeared routine, unescorted merchant vessels following predictable routes at standard speeds. Yet 4 enemy warships had positioned themselves perfectly to intercept his attack. The implications were staggering and terrifying. If Allied forces could predict submarine movements with such precision, the entire German strategy in the Atlantic was fundamentally compromised. The radio operator Becker emerged from below to report additional devastating news. "Herr Kalu, I'm receiving transmissions from other submarines. U-247 and U-681 report similar encounters. Allied escorts are appearing, where intelligence indicated undefended convoys." The scope of the intelligence failure became clear to Müller in that moment of revelation. This was not an isolated incident or exceptional bad luck. Allied forces were systematically reading German communications, predicting submarine movements, and positioning escorts to maximum advantage. The tonnage war that had seemed so promising 18 months earlier had become a deadly trap for submarine crews. Patterson watched the German submarine through Fletcher's bridge binoculars, noting the crew's obvious confusion and dismay. The psychological element of the ambush was as important as the tactical advantage. German submarine commanders had operated with confidence based on their belief in communication security and tactical surprise. Destroying that confidence would save Allied merchant ships even beyond this single encounter. The surrender negotiations proceeded with careful formality. Müller recognized the futility of resistance and the responsibility for his crew's survival. At 21:30 hours, he ordered U-573 to surface completely and prepare for boarding by American personnel. The submarine's Enigma machine and code books were thrown overboard, though Patterson's intelligence officers recognized that the cipher system had already been compromised for months. The boarding of U-573 revealed extensive intelligence about German submarine operations, including patrol schedules, fuel consumption rates, and tactical procedures. More importantly for the German crew, it demonstrated the complete transformation of Atlantic naval warfare. The confident submarine service that had terrorized Allied shipping now faced systematic countermeasures that anticipated their every move. Koch, the experienced submarine petty officer, spoke quietly to his fellow crew members as American sailors secured the submarine. "The war has changed, comrades. They know things they should not know. Our messages, our positions, our intentions, somehow they know everything." The statistical evidence supported Koch's grim assessment. German submarine losses in the North Atlantic had increased from 8 boats per month in early 1943 to 27 boats per month by November. American destroyer production had reached unprecedented levels, with 18 new escort vessels commissioning every month. Allied convoy losses had decreased from 150,000 tons monthly to less than 30,000 tons during the same period. Patterson's after-action report described the ambush as a perfect example of intelligence-led tactics coordinated with superior material resources. The 4 American destroyers had demonstrated capabilities that German naval planning had not anticipated. Their radar systems could detect surfaced submarines at ranges exceeding 12 miles. Their sonar equipment could track submerged boats with accuracy sufficient for precise depth charge attacks. Most importantly, their communication systems enabled real-time coordination with intelligence services that read German codes systematically. The capture of U-573 represented more than a single tactical victory. The submarine's crew would spend the remainder of the war in Allied prisoner camps, but their experience would spread through the German naval service through letters, reports, and word of mouth among captured personnel. The psychological impact of perfect Allied intelligence would undermine the confidence that had made submarine service attractive to Germany's most aggressive naval officers. Weber, the submarine's watch officer, reflected on the transformation during his interrogation aboard Fletcher. "We believed our codes were unbreakable," he told American intelligence officers. "We believed our tactics were superior. We believed we were winning the tonnage war. Tonight, we learned that all those beliefs were wrong." The broader implications extended far beyond submarine warfare. German military planning had assumed that Allied industrial production would remain vulnerable to submarine attacks throughout the war. The systematic defeat of submarine operations forced a fundamental reassessment of Germany's strategic situation. Without the ability to interdict Allied supply lines, German forces faced an increasingly hopeless struggle against superior resources and coordination. Müller's final log entry, written aboard Fletcher before being transferred to prisoner transport, captured the magnitude of the revelation. "The enemy possesses capabilities we never suspected. They read our messages, predict our movements, and position their forces with perfect knowledge of our intentions. The Atlantic has become their ocean, not ours." The technical analysis of U-573 provided Allied engineers with detailed information about German submarine construction, navigation systems, and tactical equipment. The boat's advanced acoustic torpedoes, improved battery systems, and enhanced diving capabilities revealed the sophistication of German engineering. However, these technical advantages had become irrelevant in the face of systematic intelligence superiority and overwhelming Allied production capacity. The convoy that had served as bait, HX-265, reached British ports 3 days later without losses. The 8 merchant ships delivered their cargo of steel, machinery, petroleum, and military equipment to support Allied operations in Europe. The successful delivery represented thousands of tons of materials that would have been lost to submarine attack under previous circumstances. Patterson's destroyer group received commendations for their tactical innovation and precise execution of the ambush. The hunter-killer tactics they demonstrated would become standard procedure for Atlantic escort operations, contributing to the systematic destruction of German submarine capabilities over the following months. The psychological warfare element, allowing submarines to believe they faced undefended targets, would be repeated dozens of times with devastating effect on German naval morale. The intelligence breakthrough that made the ambush possible remained secret for decades after the war. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park continued breaking German communications throughout the conflict, providing Allied commanders with unprecedented insight into enemy planning and operations. The Enigma decryption program, codenamed Ultra, influenced every major naval engagement in the Atlantic and contributed decisively to Allied victory. For the crew of U-573, the war ended in November 1943 with their capture and surrender. They would spend the remainder of the conflict in prisoner camps in the United States and Canada, returning to Germany only after surrender in 1945. Their submarine was studied extensively by Allied naval engineers before being used for experimental weapons testing and ultimately scrapped. The transformation they witnessed that November night represented the broader shift in the Atlantic conflict. German submarine operations, which had sunk over 14 million tons of Allied shipping by mid-1943, would account for less than 2 million tons during the final 18 months of war. The combination of systematic intelligence, superior production, and innovative tactics had turned the tonnage war decisively in favor of Allied forces. Müller survived the war and returned to Hamburg in 1946, where he worked as a marine insurance investigator. He never commanded another submarine, but his experience aboard U-573 influenced his understanding of how dramatically warfare had changed during the conflict. The confident submarine service he had known in early war years had been systematically destroyed by capabilities that German planning had never anticipated. The merchant ships of Convoy HX-265 represented more than successful cargo delivery. They symbolized the industrial and technological transformation that ultimately determined the war's outcome. Allied production capacity, combined with systematic intelligence and coordinated tactics, had created advantages that individual courage or tactical skill could not overcome. The radio transmission that began this story, "No Escorts on Convoy," became symbolic of the intelligence war that decided the Atlantic campaign. German submarine commanders continued reporting undefended convoys throughout 1944, but Allied forces read every transmission and positioned escorts accordingly. The tactical surprise that had made submarine warfare effective disappeared entirely, replaced by systematic Allied countermeasures that anticipated every German move. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.